Please be seated. So I have got apologies from Councillor Lee for early departure, but with a bit of luck we will all be able to make an early departure, so we'll see how we go. I have a motion therefore that Council receives apologies for early departure. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Young. Put the motion, moved and seconded. Those in favour, please vote. Councillors Sparrow, Wolf, Free, Leicester, Coghlan. So your light hasn't gone out? You haven't pressed the button yet. Great, perfect. There is one set of the minutes to confirm from the meeting held on the 7th of May. I move, thank you Councillor, unless there's any debate. Declare those carried. There's no public participation. I have got there are no petitions. I do have one announcement, which is for the week the 11th to the 19th of July, when myself and the Deputy Mayor will be both unavailable, that I'm using my powers under section 41A to appoint Councillor Foster as the Deputy Mayor from the 11th to the 19th of July. I will be overseas in July, so during this time the Deputy Mayor will be the acting Mayor. So that's an announcement, just so it's clear, so that we've got defined people in case of any emergency. I'm not expecting a whole raft of meetings to suddenly appear during that time. I call on members present to declare any conflict of interest. There are none. Oh, sorry. Thank you. Thank you. The advice of the officers is that it's not a conflict, as it doesn't go to the heart of the existence. No, I'm trying to find the live streaming thing. Do you have a copy of the live streaming? I also wanted to introduce one item that is not on the agenda, which is about the live streaming of the meeting. And if we could have that item come up, please. It's not on the agenda, but it's a relatively minor matter that most of you are aware of, and several of you have some views on it. So under Standing Order 3.9.5, I seek to add an item for the meeting to consider. Cameras are in place and this meeting is being filmed. However, this is a test run to be made available to both councillors and ELT prior to the next council meeting, which is planned to be going live on the internet. This council has been clear in its aim of being more transparent in transacting its business and make it easier for people to be aware of decisions and debate. I believe that live streaming council meetings, as is done by New Plymouth, Auckland, a number of other councils, is a method of ensuring citizen awareness. Views, I don't mean around this table, I mean on the internet, but we think that its staff have advised, and I agree, because there has been the issue raised, I'm adding it to the agenda tonight, and I'm seeking a vote on the decision to live stream council meetings. The next council meeting is scheduled to go live it's appropriate that the decision is taken tonight rather than deferred. So I now move, council agrees to the live streaming.
Sorry, Your Worship.
We
need to have a mover and a seconder
to put it on the agenda.
Yes.
Okay, so I've given the reason why it can't be delayed.
Yes.
So I would like, I first of all move that it's added to the agenda. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Foster.
So we need the reason that it's not on.
And it was not on the agenda because officers did not think it was a matter of sufficient importance to be on the council agenda.
So if we can have a vote on that.
Okay, so we now, it's been moved and seconded, so it's a procedural to put it on the agenda. So please, and we need a 50% majority to put it on the agenda. So please vote whether it should be on the agenda or not.
Sorry.
That's right. Councillor Ritchie, if two people press the button at once, thank you, it's on the agenda. So I now move, Council agrees to the live streaming. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Lester. Do you wish to speak? No. Thank you. Councillor Ritchie is next on the speaking order.
Oh, thank you, Madam Mayor, Councillors. I'm really interested that this has now been put onto the agenda when there was an assumption that Council had actually debated this, been given proper officer advice and then made a decision, which clearly it has not. As you will know, I have sought from the staff legal advice on issues around privacy, but I've also sought advice around issues of cost and also value for money. I have received some response. It is partial response. It does not tell us what the total cost will be. It does not canvass all of the privacy issues, which this is a public meeting, but there are privacy issues related to the dissemination of information, the permission in relation to dissemination of information, the placing of this material onto YouTube, and whether the whole process is lawful or unlawful, we do not know. Whether it is unduly intrusive, whether it is unfair, not to any public who arise. We have no answer as to what limits there are on the use of personal information. And all of these issues relate to the Privacy Act, not to issues around the public meeting and legislation around that. I have also provided information about value for money. So I looked up myself YouTube, and I looked up the Christchurch meetings and the Taupo meetings. And I tell you this, that the streaming did not appear to be live, as the publications were not up often in random order, so anyone wanting to access them would have great difficulty. That in Taupo's case, Taupo, the most recent May, the majority, in fact all but one, had nil. That the videos, far from enhancing transparency, mostly it is not possible to follow anything, even for someone record for May of this year is mostly fewer than 10 views. This is for a population of, of approximately 300,000 people. and sometimes as few as 3. It doesn't seem value for money. I understand that Christchurch is locked into a 2-year contract. We may well be locked into a contract now which is irreversible. This matter should have come before council, and the issues relating to privacy and value for money need to be properly answered. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Does anyone else wish to speak? Councillor Marsh.
Yes, Your Worship, thank you. It was just a simple matter in your right of reply. I wonder if you could confirm or deny whether at the start of a council meeting there will be a verbal warning that the cameras are on.
Thank you. I'll take the right of reply now. A couple of comments to make. I think some of the issues that you've raised, that Councillor Ritchie has raised about ensuring it's effective, indexed, easy to find, very good point. So we'll make sure that we do it better than other people. It is within the annual Democratic Services budget, and your point, Councillor Marsh, that we should make sure that people know that it's happening. I will make sure that that gets added as a standard to the beginning of our procedure, together with announcements, petitions and all that. That's fine. I would like to note the issues that have been raised. The Privacy Act does not apply insofar as the meeting is a public meeting held in a public space. We are ensuring where our processes will meet data collection principles. That's been confirmed by Deb House, our Privacy Officer, and also the Privacy Commissioner. So there's some valid concerns raised. I believe that staff have answered them, so I would now urge you to vote. Well, you have to vote. Which way you vote is up to you. That carried, and thank you for your participation. We'll now move to the papers that you have in front of you. And I will be introducing the first report, which actually in the first note actually does say that we'll put it right up the front about live streaming, but it's not going to be made publicly available tonight, so you'll have an opportunity to improve that. The first report is setting the rates for the year, and it includes all the details of general rates, targeted rates, but also when the instalments are due and what the penalty rates are. This is very important that we do this correctly so that they can be collected. We also, this is not the place to say things, because we have actually already adopted those numbers in our meeting in May. So this is just, we now have as many revaluations as possible before the end of the year, so that we know the proportions for the commercial sector and the residential sector. It is 2.49% after growth, with 2.7% for the commercial sector and 2.35% average for the residences. So if the house has gone up in value, you're likely to be paying a higher proportion. If it's slowed in value, then you'll be paying less. So it's as expected when we produced the rates plan, the annual plan earlier this year. So do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Freed. Do you wish to speak? Does anyone wish to speak? Then I shan't have a right of reply. So let's put it to the vote. Councillor Hippineman, I'm sure you pressed it. Just thank you. I declare that carried. Thank you. So we now move to report 2, Porirua Harbour and Catchment Joint Committee. Councillor Panic to introduce.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, I'm actually struggling somewhat to support the recommendations here, and I'm going to, but I'm going to explain why. Generally I do support joint committees. I think it's good to have some regional coordination. And I'd certainly like to thank officers and Councillor Sparrow for his work in this particular area. It is important, obviously, to make sure that our harbours are clean. And obviously there are some significant issues there, which is highlighted in the report. My reluctance comes somewhat in the fact that the report refers to the Porirua Whaitua Catchment Committee. And my question, quite obviously, when I got this report was, well, why are we having 2 committees? Now, I'd understood that the first committee was going to be created, but I hadn't heard about this Whaitua one. It does strike me that there is some duplication, and I don't really see why you need to have 2 committees when actually you could just have one, because you're going to have the same people on it anyway. And it just seems to me that perhaps hasn't been thought through as carefully as possible. Nevertheless, I'm not going to be difficult. I'm going to vote for it. Regional Council could engage in some more discussion before setting up the Whaitua committee, just to see if we can get a bit more common sense. Now, they do have different functions around freshwater, and this is more around the Porirua harbour strategy. But nevertheless, I just think if you have to service 2 committees, you are actually adding to your costs and the complexities of managing what is, after all, just one resource. So I guess at this point, let's support it and then see if we can get a bit of common sense later on. Now, Councillor Foster has raised an issue with me, which is about getting our representative to report to the Environment Committee. I had envisaged that that would be just done as a matter of course, but I'm happy to move an amendment to the report if that's satisfactory. So to councillors. So I think I can do this, Madam Mayor, just move the recommendations pro forma and then just add a recommendation that our appointment to the Joint Committee will report to the Environment Committee on a regular basis. Does that sound satisfactory in terms of wording? Sorry, I've just been given it now. And I'm sure there will be a separate process to nominate our person, but I will be signalling that I'll be supporting Councillor Sparrow for the position.
Thank you, Councillor Pennant. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Foster. Do you wish to speak? Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak? Thank you, Councillor Pennant.
If I could just say very briefly, it is my understanding that the Whaitua Committee is actually a completely different committee. It has a much broader responsibility than Porirua Harbour, much broader. So I just want to correct that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. Anyone else? I just add a couple of words that, of advice that I've had from one of our officers, which is that, the Whaitua Committee is a non-statutory advisory body about all of the waterways within that area. Not, it may or may not have exactly the same boundaries. It's rare that a catchment goes across 2 local government areas, and I also want to say that I wish to support, when we come to the nominations, Councillor Sparrow, because I think that will minimise the duplication involved. But I also support it coming back to the Environment Committee. It's been a slightly strange process coming to this point, but I think it is more constructive to support it than not. So do you want to wish for a right of reply?
Yes, I do, because I did seek officer advice this afternoon, and my understanding was that, there's a number of Whaitua committees, and this one is the Porirua one and will largely cover this particular bit of water. But anyway, in the interest of just making some progress and getting on with things, I will be supporting it with the amendment. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
So if we do recommendations and then I'll call, please vote for recommendations. It's just reporting back to the Environment Committee regularly. I mean, we can.
Are we on or off?
We're just... vote on, have you seen that one now? 1 through to 6. Thank you. Declare that carried. I now call for nominations for the position. Do I have a nomination? Thank you, Councillor Pannett. You're nominating?
Councillor Sparrow.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Ritchie. Do we have any other nominations? Let's make sure we're clear about this. Councillors, I will put that nomination to the vote. Please vote whether you support Councillor Sparrow to this position. Thank you. I declare that, and congratulations, Councillor Sparrow. So we now move to the next item. When I find it, Councillor Foster, can I call on you to introduce Report 3?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. It's interesting to see the different ways in which these various SOIs are presented in these particular reports, and this one's quite different to the other one. So the first one, just two things to comment on. The first one, the Wellington Waterfront Company one. Those people who have either read or were members of the Transport and Urban Development Committee would remember that when we did the draft, we actually had a draft SOI that had all the normal information in it. Now you have an SOI which has, well, not very much at all. So this is the effect of bringing WWL in-house and now having a shell company. So we now have the exciting list of activities and the huge dollars which are attached to that of 0, 0, 0 and 1 somewhere. So that is what that paper is about. It is just simply the legal process that you go through. The WCCL one, in contrast, is very full. I'd like to comment on a few things just briefly in there. One is that I think there might be a degree of undue optimism around the ongoing work in respect of trolley bus wires, because it's pretty clear that Greater Wellington has a particular set of decisions that it is expecting to make. So I think there are some issues which that will need to be responded to by the cable car company. Personally, my personal judgment is actually Greater Wellington shouldn't be making a decision like that. What it should be doing is simply saying, let's go out and go through a contract process and see what comes out of that contract process, rather than writing one particular technology out. And I think that would be a much sounder way, and they'd have a much more transparent set of costs, given that GW don't actually seem to know what the costs actually are. But that's another matter. I think you'll find in the document there's some excellent work that the cable car company is doing in terms of customer focused work, trying to get be able to get more people up the cable car, particularly at peak times when we have the cruise ships in town, and improving the ticketing and gating situations there. They're also doing work looking at doing work both in the cable car lane and also the Kelburn precinct, and obviously they have in the last year put in place the new terminal. One thing that's not in there, as far as I could see, is the artwork that was in place during the festival, which I think people looked at and said that was really fantastic. They are looking, and they told us they were looking at doing that on a more ongoing basis, more permanent basis. And I think we would all say that would be a fantastic addition to the journey up what is already an iconic journey up the cable car. So I think that's all really I wanted to comment on, and just commend it to you, and look forward to your support for that. I think they do a fantastic job, and they're very proud of the work that they do.
Thank you very much, Councillor Foster. Seconding? Thank you, Nicola. Councillor Young, would you like to speak? Anyone wish to speak? Okay, we will now put... Sorry, that's right. I didn't catch my eye. You have caught my eye. Councillor Panner.
Mayor, thank you, Councillor Foster, for your comments about the trolleys, because this issue has not been handled well, in my opinion, by Greater Wellington. So this, we still don't actually have any costs in terms, if the trolleys are goner next week, about how much it will cost to remove the wires. The statement of intent, of course, has no information on that, so it's got some problems. Page 36, you will have seen that it is seen to be a positive contributor to our strategies in the economic area and in terms of improving access to the city. You will have seen on page 53 around the corporate risk, which is seen as high around the cessation of the trolleys, and yet this is just not analysed in any depth. What does it do to the financials? All these questions actually haven't been answered. And when we looked at the draft, of course, we weren't sure what... Oh dear, I've got some competition. When we looked at these SOIs in March, or April, sorry, actually it does have quite a material impact on what we're passing tonight, and actually it probably should have been updated. Clearly the company doesn't want to see the trolleys go, and really they should be able to last for a few more years until we can guarantee that we can get fully electric buses.
Thank you. We've now got Councillors Free and Peck. Can I just share with you a piece of officer advice, is that when a final decision is made by the Regional Council, if it is, the company may need to revise them then, but it would be premature to do so at this stage. So, Councillor Free.
Just a thought that's occurred to me that I don't know if somebody else can maybe address, but sorry, I'll stand up. Okay, is that money has been spent on the overhead network, and I'm actually is that reflected in an increase in the value of the assets held by the company?
That will be answered in the right of reply. Councillor Peck.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thanks for the officer advice around Greater Wellington's contribution to this debate. I join with Councillor Pannett actually in her concerns about the way the whole trolley bus debate has been handled. I think it has been poorly handled, and I would hope that once that decision is made, we can very quickly get back to WCCL and get work done around the financials, because if there is an issue around the financials being too optimistic, that's going to have to be dealt with, because somebody along the way is going to have to pay in those circumstances, and my concern is it's going to be the long-suffering ratepayer once again. The other issue which I raised some time ago in another forum of this council about the trolley bus lines is that actually they carry the CBD free network. And I don't think Greater Wellington has given any consideration to this at all. If the trolley bus lines come down, the CBD free network as it is now will disappear or will have to be completely reconfigured. So there's going to be some cost consequent on that decision too. And I think before decisions are made, people need to understand the implications of it. I'm a little concerned that maybe this has not been thought through to conclusion, and I don't know, we have no impact on what Greater Wellington are going to do, but I think we need to be mindful of where this is likely to sit if the decision is finally made that they're going to abandon the trolley buses.
Councillors, may I just point out that we've made a very complete submission on the matter to the Regional Council that traversed, I think, most of these issues. There are some ongoing conversations, but this is probably not the time to have the transport mode discussion, with due respect. So are there any further points to be added, and may I counsel the right of replier not to go into transport in a great deal of depth? Not saying you can't say anything.
I will take that advice and not launch into a debate about you want to go in terms of trying to get some answers. Now, what the advice you've had already from the Mayor is that when Greater Wellington makes whatever decision they make, and the decision they're likely to make, then clearly that's material to the future of the company. Whether it's material to the future of the company in the next year is a different matter, because obviously the Greater Wellington is looking at a decision for 2017, a decision to take effect mid-2017. Having said that, clearly if the decision is the trolleys are going, then the cable car company needs to have essentially an exit plan. Now, if you look at what are the issues which are likely to occur there, the first one of them, if you look at the Appendix 2, the equity, now I'm not quite sure how the equity is dealt with in terms of what the value of the overhead wires is, but the total equity of the entire company is only 7.6 million. So you'd be thinking there that, given that's cable car and the tunnels and the rolling stock and the overheads, it's not going to be a huge amount of money that's needed to be written off. The issue will be what is the cost of removing it, and it was interesting, and thanks to the Mayor for passing this to me today, an interview with Councillor Paul Swain, who was saying, oh look, in answer to a question, it's not our problem to get rid of the wires, it's somebody else's problem. Well, yeah, thanks very much. So there is an issue there. What is the cost of removing the wires if that was to happen, and what is the scrap value of the wires? So there's some issues there. So I guess what I'm saying is that in terms of the physical infrastructure, probably the costs are going to be relatively limited, but there are going to be some issues there which we will need to have more detail on. We don't have that at the moment, but that's an issue we've certainly asked the company to pay attention to. The second one is that in terms of the ongoing operating cost, at the moment, if you look at the numbers again, the cable car itself makes money. The trolley wire, the overhead wires doesn't, and in fact there's a small loss there, and that's related to depreciation. But there is going to be an issue there of the sharing of the overheads between the two parts of the organisation. So clearly those overheads are not going to be spread between the overheads and the overhead wire component and the cable car component. So it may be that the cable car company is not able to make quite as much money, and maybe it affects the dividend it's able to pay. But how material that's going to be, again, we don't know at this stage. So there's definitely some more work to be done, and that is work, I think, which will need to be done post any Greater Wellington Regional Council decision on the trolley buses.
Thank you, Councillor. Please vote.
Oh, I'm sorry, I should have taken Connie.
No, you shouldn't. Yep.
He isn't.
Thank you. Noted. Thank you, Councillor Lee. Now, I'd like to move to report 4, exemption of a CCO from the statutory monitoring regime. Councillor Lester, please introduce us.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm tempted to just move this, but I'll provide a brief explanation. This is the same as for the Joe Aspel Trust and Hutt Meadow Trust in terms of exempting Wellington Waterfront Limited from the reporting requirements of a CCO. The reason being that the waterfront company even remains is that it's required to do so to hold the assets under the Marine and Coastal Areas Act. Otherwise, all services of the waterfront company have been transferred internally. Because that company structure is there, it remains. However, we don't want it to report under requirements of the CCOs. Hence, I move this report.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Foster. Any debate? Then we will vote on the matter. I now move to Councillor Coghlan. Please would you introduce the final statements of intent for the 5 CCOs that report to your committee?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm just going to move the paper.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Penny Mercer, do you wish to speak? Does anyone else wish to speak about these 5 wonderful organisations? Right. We will now vote on their statements of intent. And I now call on Councillor Pannett to introduce Report 6 from the Environment Committee, Water Sensitive Urban Design Guide.
Will be brief, just because half of the council hasn't had a look at this, but this is an excellent initiative, so thank you to the staff and to the public who have put some input into it. We're going to work with nature rather than against it to manage water in our environment, and there's so many environmental benefits from doing this. It's going to be excellent. We had quite a lot of discussion around how effective it was going to be and how it will be implemented, and so thank you, councillors, for raising those issues. As you'll have seen, this needs to be integrated into the Code of Practice of Land Development, and that's really where it will have its teeth. And we will also be looking at this at LTP time in terms of whether we can get some real initiatives on the ground. The guide itself is written very well. Actually, it's a great example of how to write a technical document in very accessible English. The only caution I would say is that it is very positive. There are costs to doing this, as there is anything. It is better for newer buildings rather than older buildings. Older buildings, it is more difficult to do that retro work. And I know just from personal experience, trying to get a green roof onto the library roof was quite tricky and quite expensive. And so I think that's something that will need to be examined in more detail as we do some more work. But look, it's a great piece of work. It's part of our eco-city objectives, and I'm very pleased to be passing it tonight. And I presume I can do my SOIs later?
No, let's just do, yes, we'll come back with the others. I think it's best to do this. Councillor Penny Mercer, do you wish to speak?
I do, thank you. Yes, I'm very pleased to support this for all the reasons that the report gave, and essentially this enables us to consider a whole other palette of tools to address some fairly big challenges to do with water runoff apart from other matters. Acronym there, WSUD, and you could say water suds or something like that. But you know, one of my relations, female relations, she was called Waihopi, soapy water. Leave it there.
Thank you in your role, I think, as Arts and Culture Portfolio Leader for that contribution. Councillor Ritchie.
I just want to make a couple of process comments, actually. I think that possibly this, but certainly the following too, they should be as attached below in order that the public can see them. And I'll just say that, don't need any response, although when we get to the SOIs, approve the following SOIs as attached rather than outlined, because they're not outlined. So I'd just make that suggestion. But the second thing I want to say is that this is a very...
I just address that process matter. Sure. My understanding is that as they are reports from the committee, those items are in the committee papers. So I don't know if I need any further advice from... excuse me, Sally. That's nothing to do with that. Councillor Ritchie, I think, raised an important point in that we are agreeing to a policy here, but where is the policy? I mentioned that it's in the committee papers. Do we need to have it attached or in an appendix or in some other way? thank you for raising the issue, but we feel that it's addressed, but we'll make sure that it is.
As outlined below, they're not outlined, so it needs to be changed somehow. Look, just very briefly, this design guide is very important, but because it's not attached, most of you probably won't know, Councillor Freewill, that it is only an introduction. It doesn't actually ensure that it will be implemented. That is the next stage, and that is part of the recommendations. But the implementation has to be watched very, very closely, because without implementation, we've just got another plan, another guide, but nothing necessarily happening. There may be some discussion with developers around better ways of working with nature in terms of developments, but that's not going to be enough. It has never been enough, and it has to be enough, because we are facing significantly more issues, climate change issues, flooding issues, but we've always faced them. And as our city becomes less porous because of more tar seal, more concrete and so on, we have to find better solutions. This is an excellent report, but it's only an introduction. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to say a few words about this, and then you could give us a little context for the other parts of what's happening with the water-sensitive urban design. It's an extremely important issue as we have more intense rainfall, as we have more people living in the city, and as we value our streams and harbour more. I'd like to add the important role of art, both in the existing piece of work that was through the tunnel through to what was the Kumatoto stream at the end of Woodward Street. I'd also like to note that I've had a very brief look at the design for the Cenotaph area, and again, in that case, the Waipiro stream, there will be reference to it in an artistic way. So while the physical way of dealing with our rainfall and the cultural way is important, the artistic is as well. And I'm sure Councillor Pannup will address how we may be looking at, in the future, bringing it into code of practice for land development matters like this. But let's think back to an item we did earlier today, which is put Councillor Sparrow on the committee for looking into the whole Pororua Harbour and cleanliness of the water going into that. It's everything from planting up the sides of the streams to educating people and just encouraging recreational access so that people know how valuable and attractive our streams and our rivers are. So with that, I'll hand it over to Councillor Free.
Yes, thank you. I guess I want to encourage everybody here to including the public, to actually have a look at this document. It is only an introduction, but it's really well written, as Councillor Pannup said, and it actually has some really aspirational ideas for how we might move towards designing better housing and better streets and a whole lot of other initiatives really well illustrated. And I do understand that it's going on the website, but it is just an introduction. It will be followed up by another document which will have more technical details and which, as has already been alluded to, can be included or referenced in the Code of Practice and in some of our policies. So.
Thank you, Councillor. Right of reply, I think.
Madam Mayor, so as you'll have seen in the report, and I tried to allude to it, submitters felt that the guide, as you've got today, didn't give enough detail to make for successful implementation. So the work has essentially been split into two parts. So obviously we've got a little way to go before we get that second bit of work. And look, even when we get it into the code, and I think Councillor Free's been good on this, more needs to be actually done to educate people. We may need to incentivise people as well, but that is really a matter for the long-term plan to be thinking about that. Obviously, it is a long-term process, and educating relevant professionals is quite a complex task. But nevertheless, this is an excellent beginning, and I'd certainly like to congratulate officers in particular for the work that they've done on it, because it is a very good document. Thank you, and I will just be brief on acknowledging that Councillor Coghlan didn't take up your time talking about her CCOs. Look, I just maybe just like to say, from my perspective, a greater focus on environmental issues. That was at my request from capacity, given the enormous impact that water management can have on our environment. This is excellent. And a bigger emphasis on risk management. As Councillor Free will know, there are significant risks in this particular business. You'll see that the performance measures are to come. That is a bit of an ongoing project, but they need to be well integrated across all of the councils if we all do amalgamate. The zoo. Councillor Marsh, I'll acknowledge you. This organisation continues to be a very good success story. High visitor numbers, exceeding the targets. There's a problem here in terms of, particularly as many people in this council have made a commitment to the living wage, they haven't been able to offer salary increases, so that will be raised as part of the LTP, I promise you. Karen Fifield has set up an animal welfare committee, which I'm thrilled about. I sit on that, given we've had many conversations about the ethics of keeping animals in captivity, so there's some very interesting conversations going on at that committee, and it's great to see that happening. The sanctuary, look, they've got a difficult task, but they are doing well, and I have a lot of confidence in the leadership there. They know that just the progress that they've made so far isn't enough, but I think they are on the right track, and I think they deserve our support, and they've clearly outlined in the SOI some of the things they intend to do to give them sustainable. Years, but no, it's a great job they've done, and I look forward to seeing more successful initiatives coming from them.
Thank you, Councillor Pannett. Does anyone wish? Oh, do I have a seconder?
Second? No, we don't have.
Councillor Lester, do you wish to speak? Does anyone else wish to speak? I'd just like to, at this point, thank all of the people who are on our boards as well for the work that they do. And let's move to voting on these. Thank you. I declare those statements of intent carried. I'd now like to call on Councillor Ahapini Mercer to introduce the report of the Regulatory Committee. I don't think can he beat his time on having the committee?
Thank you for those kind words of support, Madam Mayor. I move, if it's possible, to both 1 and 2 with no further add-ons.
Marsh seconding. Any debate? Let's vote. Have to have speed typing up the front here. Very efficient, Councillor. Okay, thank you. I declare that carried. We now move to resolution to exclude the public for pursuant to the Local Government Official Information on Meetings Act to protect the privacy of natural persons. Please, can I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Ahapini Mercer. Those in favour, please vote about public excluded or not. Now, yes.